Right, so for many of us, I think the best result from 2024 was the successful nesting of roseate terns on Normandy Marsh. It was a great example, I think, of people working together to help birds. And many of you went to see the birds, so it was rather hard to decide who should tell the story. But rather than pick those who were personally involved in the wardening or the decisions, we thought it was better to ask someone who, like most of you, was simply delighted to be able to watch the birds nesting. Amy Squire has been a birder almost all of her life. In that time, she's carried out bird surveys, become a bird ringer, and a successful photographer. Few of us have actually achieved as much as Amy in our lifetimes. For example, how many of you have stood up here in front of the HOS Members Day and given a talk? She has. She has. Not many of you. Amy did. In fact, 3 years ago, she was one of the HOS young members to describe their perfect birding year, a session that everyone who watched absolutely remembers today, and was an amazing session. Today, her focus is on roseate terns and the success that they achieved last summer. Please welcome Amy Squire.
Thank you, Keith, and hello, HOS. I'm going to apologise in advance because I've got a bit of a nasty cough, so sorry if my voice is a bit croaky. But anyway, as you now know, my name is Amy Squire. I'm 15 years old, so I'm a HOS young member, and I'm also a trainee bird ringer and very keen all-round birder. So, as Keith has already introduced, and because we are HOS, we are the Hampshire Ornithological Society, what's better way, I thought, than to spend the Members' Day celebrating perhaps Hampshire's greatest bird success story, that of our roseate tern success. And many of you in the audience will have already heard of this success. Many of you will have been the amazing people who created our roseate tern success, but also some of you may not have heard of this story. So no matter what category you fall under, I want to take you back to where it all started last year. Normandy Marsh is a haven for bird life, with a habitat of saline lagoon with shingle beaches and salt marsh all around. It's perfect for our resident bird species that call it home all year round, but also for our overwintering birds, such as the waterfowl who flock here during the winter, and perhaps most importantly for our summer visitors who come here to breed and to nest along our shoreline. So every single summer I always get most excited about a certain group of birds, our seabird celebrities, the terns. So we are lucky enough to get 3 main species of terns on Normandy Marsh. So we have the sandwich tern with their crazy crests, the common tern, who makes such a cacophony of noise in their colonies, and the little tern, our smallest breeding tern, who hover above our heads before diving in to catch their fish prey. Now, any second spent watching these birds is absolutely magical anyway. So what happens when something unexpected turns up? Something different, something out of the ordinary, and something rare. And that's exactly what happened last year on a sea watch at Cutbridge at Milford-on-Sea on the 14th of May. Not just 1, but 2 roseate terns were picked up. Now, later on that day, presumably the same pair were observed in Normandy Lagoon. Now, it's not unusual to see roseate terns in the southwest Solent during spring, but what was unusual was that it was the first ever record of roseate terns actually on Normandy Lagoon. Now, you may be thinking, why is the roseate tern so important? What was all the fuss about when it arrived? Well, the roseate tern is a red-listed bird in the UK. It's a bird of conservation concern, And this is mainly due to how it just came back from the brink of extinction in the 19th century after exploitation for the millinery trade. And this led to their protection in the 20th century, and it ensured that the numbers recovered. So the UK and Irish population was approximately 3,812 pairs in 1968. However, more persecution on their wintering grounds meant that this population did decrease again to 521 pairs in 1985. And thankfully this trend has reversed, but their UK breeding population is exclusively on Coquet Island, which is off the coast of Northumberland. So away from our roseate terns and Normandy, I'm going to give you a bit of context and take you to Coquet Island. So this is the stronghold for roseate terns in the UK, with 100 breeding pairs found there. And they already do face poor breeding success, roseate terns. But what was really sad was how they were devastated by avian influenza in 2022 and 2023. Last year, however, nearly knocked my water over, they produced a record number of chicks, over 100, my notes have gone muddled. Last year, the colony did bounce back, producing more chicks than ever before, and 191 of those chicks hatched, with 92% of them going on to fledge. So 175 fledged out of 191 hatched, and that's amazing. So going back to our breeding our roseate terns at Normandy, over the next couple of weeks, the pair were regularly seen in the lagoon, and they were on a prominent location on one of the islands and often copulating. So breeding seemed highly likely, but the pair made regular visits to offshore islands, so indicating that they might not have yet decided on the lagoon as their nesting site. Now, what often isn't known by many people is that roseate tern breeding in Hampshire has been recorded before, and was first recorded in 1957. And they have made around 30 attempts before, always choosing to nest on the offshore shingle beaches. And perhaps the reason we haven't heard about this a lot is the fact that their breeding success has always been poor, with losses due to severe weather, to predation, high tides, and worst of all, illegal egg collecting. Now, roseate terns do tend to associate with other tern species. They're sometimes observed as what's been called kleptoparasites, where they steal food from other species. So, as the majority of common terns last year, in April and early May, moved from the offshore Shingle Islands to Normandy Lagoon, it's perhaps what prompted the roseate terns to finally decide to nest on the lagoon itself. And they did. And because roseate terns, a rare bird such as them, is never going to go unnoticed, their presence was spread online through photographs, comments, and reports. And although the lagoon is protected by deep water, a water-filled ditch, and an electrified anti-predator fence, it hadn't stopped egg collecting before, with perhaps the worst case being the first ever avocet breeding attempt lost to egg thieves. Now, this led to a decision being made to try to organise some evening and nighttime wardening as nesting became present with the roseate terns. So Steve Laycock and Neil Bocock offered to coordinate this, while Keith Betton sent a cryptically worded appeal to host members asking for volunteers. Eventually, over 30 people volunteered, and they acted as the Normandy wardens, where they took overnight shifts on every day of the incubation period with a thermal imaging camera to ensure that no egg thieves could try to get to the reserve. Now, financial support from the RSPB also enabled them to hire 2 portaloos and to purchase a tent for a base for the wardening. And 550 volunteering hours eventually paid off, and the pair started brooding. Vegetation rapidly obscured the nest, and it caused much anticipation as to when the presumed hatching date approached. But eventually, the first chick was sighted on the 17th of June, with the second being seen a couple of days later. Now, these chicks were regularly fed sand eels and small squid, and they grew quickly, with the older chick taking its first flight within the lagoon on the 14th of July, and the second following on the 17th. In the end, both parents and juveniles had left the lagoon by the 22nd of July, and it was a great success, and also not only the first successful breeding record of roseate terns in Hampshire, but also perhaps the first inland record of breeding roseate terns in Hampshire. So in general, how are our tern species doing? Well, climate change has meant that our tern species are suffering, often with storm surges and sea level rise, which is basically eating away the habitat in which they love to nest. But a way around this for the future, it isn't all doom and gloom, because I'm very proud to be part of the tern, there we go, climate change, the tern ringing scheme. So I'm a member of the New Forest Ringing Group, and each year we are lucky enough to get to go out to ring the terns on Normandy Lagoon. Now, the photo that I've put up here is probably going to embarrass a couple of members in the audience, along with myself. But you can see it's not exactly the most glamorous job. We have to wear all sorts of old clothes that you don't mind getting covered in tern poo and regurgitated fish. Like I said, we each year get to go out and ring the terns. But last year, because of the roseate terns, we didn't want to risk disturbing them. So we couldn't go out to ring, but luckily, well, amazingly, the adult roseate terns were metal ringed, and so determined efforts to read the ID numbers meant that we could see that the terns were ringed as chicks on Rockerbill colony, County Dublin, which is the largest roseate tern colony in Europe. And this data is revealing that numbers in this colony, 1,100 pairs, are increasing. So it appears that birds are being almost exported to new locations, where hopefully they can establish new colonies in the future. Now, summer is not too far around the corner, and the terns will be back soon. A few have been sighted recently. So who knows what might happen this year? Maybe the roseate terns will have remembered the great success that they have had as much as we have today. Maybe this year I might get to say I've ringed a roseate tern. So on that note, I want to say a special thank you to Pete Donnell, Keith Batten, Steve Laycock, Neil Bocock, Jamie Ward, Dimitri Moore, Hoss and all the volunteers, and the RSPB, without whom the roseate tern success and also my talk today wouldn't have been possible. Thank you all so much for listening.